See you all here today. I'd like to introduce Dr. Monica Berger-González, who's here with us today for a really special conversation I'm excited to bring to this community and engage in. So Monica is a medical anthropologist focused on indigenous Maya knowledge and health practices in Guatemala. Just this week, she was announced as a recipient of the 2025 McNulty Prize Catalyst Fund from the McNulty Foundation and Aspen Institute. And that's for her work through Salud Verde, or green health, increasing healthcare access for underserved communities in Guatemala through research and programs that scale plant-based regenerative medicine, which is a lot of what we'll talk about today. So welcome, Monica. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm so happy. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So today we'll be exploring how the indigenous Maya perspectives on health have shaped your work and what we can draw from them from the practice of biomimicry. So we've talked before about some of the overlap between medicine and biomimicry when we had Dr. Barbara Natterson Horowitz, who looks to veterinary medicine and all that we've learned about the functioning and bodies of all of our fellow animals and how that can give us good interpretations of human health and approaches to managing it. But this is even more expansive and brings in really the whole worldview of the traditional Maya sense of, the whole worldview and sense of health relationship between humans and the rest of nature and the interconnectedness of it all. And this is a really fascinating area to explore with so many fields coming into it together. So Monica, to start, can you give us an introduction to medical anthropology? Yeah.
Certainly. So I get that question a lot. What do you guys do? You're not doctors. You're not really anthropologists. What do you do? And so it's truly at the intersection of both fields. And medical anthropology examines how our concepts of health, well-being, illness, disease are truly shaped and influenced by social, cultural, biological, environmental factors. So the experience of health is pretty much a product of how we were raised, what our values are, our epistemology, what we believe to be true, our axiology, what are our values. And in medical anthropology, we look at the intersection of culture, society, health. So it is a very growing field in public health, for example, which has to do with how can we, in multicultural societies, which is now the norm globally, how can we shape better access to healthcare that is responsive to all of these interpretations of what being healthy is? So that's a very small summary.
Yeah, no, that's great. So then let's now zoom into our particular case that we'll talk about today among the Maya. So I think a lot of people, when they think of the Maya, they think of ancient civilizations with stone temples and cities, and it's something very long ago. But this is very much a people and culture that has continued all through those centuries and is really thriving today. So give us a picture of the Maya today.
Certainly. So we differentiate between Maya civilization and Maya culture. The Maya civilization, which was pre-Hispanic, collapsed with the invasion during the conquest, right? However, the Maya people and the Maya culture, through the post-classic period to colonial times to today, is pretty much alive and thriving. It is half of the population of Guatemala. But Maya communities are spreading what we call Mesoamerica, from the south of Mexico, Guatemala, a little bit of Belize. In Guatemala specifically, we have 21 different ethno-linguistic Maya groups. So you imagine at such a small country, we have 24 languages, 21 of which are of Maya origin. I only speak Cachiquel and understand a bit of others, but it is a strong culture that has shaped our history and the knowledge that we see today alive.
Yeah, that's great. So this work really has you bridging worlds and approaches, right? So you've got your PhD from ETH Zurich, and you've also studied for 7 years with traditional Maya healers. Can you talk us through a bit of like what that process was like, going from all of this academic training and then coming back to Guatemala and really steeping into the traditional approaches?
So it's been a little bit of what came before and after. I was running an NGO in the highlands of Guatemala in a beautiful paradise called Atitlan, which has a lake and volcanoes. And I had this tendency to go and do work for development, right? I was very young. I had a master's in environmental anthropology. And we were doing adaptation to climate change. So I was working there, bringing new technologies to monitor different things. We were doing payment for environmental services and so on. But one day a hurricane hit, very bad one. Hurricane Stan killed thousands of people. The flooding was so bad, mountains collapsed. And I was stuck with my team for weeks in a community where there was no electricity for weeks. So all our technology failed. All our GIS, GP, all our satellite systems, everything failed. And in the end, we survived because the Tsutuhil Maya people, who are my neighbors, fed us, warmed our food with firewood. And whenever someone in my team got sick, they would heal us with medicinal plants. And so that was the beginning into a bit of cultural humility of asking the question, what am I not seeing? And during that time, I had a very serious health event, and I truly had to rely on the comadronas, the Achich, Omanel, which are the traditional healers, to recuperate health. And so that started a whole worldview into what's beyond what we see, what's behind this way of living and this relationship with the forest. Because one thing that's pretty impressive about that, Andrew, is that the only town where no one died was San Juan, La Laguna, where I was living, because the elders woke the mayor up at 3 a.m. and told him, we're reading the signs, and the mountain is gonna crumble, and it's gonna cover everything. The mayor heard because he believed in ancestral wisdom, and anyway, we were pulling the last people out to the safety area when the mountain collapsed, and all of this barrio died. So our surveillance systems couldn't do that. And along with all these little windows of seeing into a wisdom that we really didn't understand, I started to ask questions and ask healers. So that took me into a journey of training as a Maya. Something happened to me that was very severe and lethal. I would have died. But I knew something in me said, no, what modern Western science cannot give me answers for. I'm sure I have this gut feeling that the Maya wisdom will. And I kept having all these dreams, crazy dreams. So I went to a healer, who became my teacher, Tata Simeon Takira. And he said, well, I've been waiting for you to come and ask me because I've been dreaming you for a long time and you're so stubborn. So do you really want an answer to your question? That means you have to empty your cup to learn what we have to teach you, because you were so full of ideas, nothing else fits. That started a 7-year journey into Maya wisdom, being trained as an achich myself. And in the process of these, they said, you're going to have a mission that's very important to bridge the Western world and the modern world, but you have to train really well. So pay attention, because big opportunities are coming. Anyway, I was giving a conference in Costa Rica, and this professor from the ETH Zurich said, Monica, something I said in the presentation triggered him and said, I want you to write this book with me. And then he said, I would like to offer you a PhD position. So I ended up going to ETH to study cancer from the perspective of Maya medicine and modern oncology. And so I had to train. I did a PhD, and then I did 2 postdocs to really go into the science, evidence-based approaches, hardcore, right? Working with really good psychoneuroimmunologists and oncologists and all sorts of specialists. And I learned a lot. But when it was time, my job was to build a bridge between 2 very disparate knowledge systems. And so somehow we had to create a methodology. I only work with intercultural transdisciplinary research for a reason. It creates these bridges across knowledge divides, across knowledge systems. And we had to come back to Guatemala, bring all these scientists here, and we brought all of the Maya scientists and elders to Switzerland to exchange knowledge on patients, the conception of health and well-being. where does cancer come from? What are the triggers, from both knowledge systems? And that required dropping everything we thought we knew in order to learn what was in front of us, because we were basically, what's the word in English? Trampling ourselves, when we were the ones not being able to walk forward because of our own conceptions. Mm-hmm. So I was very lucky to have really good mentors as scientists, Dr. Jacob Zinstag and others, who were benevolent enough to question their own assumptions. These are professors who were close to retiring, who I think already have proven to the whole scientific world they were good enough and were willing to take that leap of faith to engage in a very bizarre conversation with Maya healers. So coming back, we always had to do two protocols, always. The science protocol that needed to be approved by ETH series, and the Maya protocol that needed to be approved by the elders, which included Maya ceremonies, consultations with the fire, and all sorts of other things that I can tell you about or not, mm-hmm. and merge both. So our way of looking at the world changed, had to, because we couldn't just use the goggles we had.
So I love that, the goggles. We talk about that a lot on Ask Nature, about how we would love, after people have been exposed to information on Ask Nature, that then you can walk through the woods with Ask Nature goggles on and basically observe nature through a new lens that you've kind of internalized by looking at how, describing biology through function and how things are really relating to each other and what they're doing. What were some of those goggles that you acquired through studying that way?
Okay. I guess related to biomimicry, the first set that was very useful for me was seeing nature as part of it instead of an outside observer. So we usually have this tendency to become the scientists. We go and we design a transit walk to collect, in my case, to study medicinal plants in the subtropical forest. And so I had been documenting hundreds of treatments from healers for different ailments. And I needed to collect the samples in the forest to know the species, right? Because I only knew that this plant was sacbe, but who knows what that is, right? So the only way to know was to walk the forest with the elders. And of course, when I went the first times on these transit walks with my GPS, measuring everything, I found 30 species in one day, which was pretty cool. But then one of the healers challenged me and said, "Where's your training? You're using your scientist goggles. Where's your heart? Why have you not asked Mother Earth permission? Why have you not connected?" And so I would have to I remember this training, I had it, but somehow I felt like if I applied it, I was going to fail my scientist training. So I took my shoes off, grounded on earth, put my knees on the ground, and had a very heart-to-heart conversation with Sultaka, Nantat Ish, Nantat Ileu, Mother Earth, which in the Maya cosmovision is alive. It's a mother. And all the creature, plants, animals, are older brothers and sisters because, they were here before us. And so with that benevolence and that love, they walked me through the Kekchi prayers. I only knew them in Kekchikel. And they said, remember to ground and ask for your eyes to open, but the eyes from your heart, from your ukush, from your soul. Let that sink in, feel it. And when you walk the forest, you will see more than what you think. And it was impressive. We found 70 species that day, not 30, and really weird ones. I was looking for this begonia species for 3 years, and I could never find it. And I found it that day, but it was a hunch. Like I took the wrong corner. I kneeled down in a place I shouldn't have kneeled down, and there it was. And flowering, which was amazing because I had never seen it flower. And so I thought, man, we're going to finally be able to identify these species. But it was wearing both hats, both ways of seeing and feeling the forest. And I cannot explain to you rationally what the change is. I can only tell you that is a change in perception. Even the colors look brighter, the sounds of animals. I could observe insects and relationships in the forest that I was oblivious to before. Somehow there was an intentionality from my brain predisposed to understand relationships. So I could now see the little insects in the plants and ask, what role do they play in this medicine? Or, see the sunlight and how much sunlight is actually producing the medicine in this plant, and how is the relationship of this whole universe and ecosystem in this tiny little part of the forest affecting what I think I'm observing. Yeah. So that's one example.
That's a great example. It's amazing how it's not that you needed to learn a bunch of specific things to look for or learn a lot of the relationships beforehand. It was really about orienting your approach and your mindset going in and opening up your senses, essentially. Yeah, we talk about that a lot, how we can be very focused visually, and we're so focused visually that we're not even paying attention to all of the clues and information that we're drawing audibly or through touch or scent or smell, or scent and smell, obviously the same taste. Yeah, so we're seeing some comments going here about the two-eyed seeing. One thing I wanted to ask you about what you said was that you knew the prayers in one language and they were doing them in another language. Were they the same prayers across this whole area, or were they different prayers?
So you see, the words are not important. It's the attention and the relationship to the forest. So instead of positioning ourselves as, hey, thank you, I'm just going to go into the forest and collect samples, when you visit someone at their home, you just don't go straight into the kitchen and pour yourself some lemonade. Yeah, there's a protocol. Hello, how are you? I brought you some cake or whatever, and you sit and you talk. So the elders ask, why do you go into the forest with such disrespect? You're a guest. Can you position yourself there and understand how benevolent and humble our mother is, that she let you have more than what you think you're going to get, but just, connect yourself. And so the prayers, for example, always have the same foundation. And I would say, which is heart of sky, heart of earth, heart of wind, heart of fire, heart of water, heart of wind, my inner breath. I connect with all that is lovingly and respectfully. And that's always the 4 cardinal points. Always in Maya thought, the universe is infinite. They were great mathematicians and astronomers. So we have tons of calendars that measure time, different cycles of time. And in an infinite universe, any place can be the center. So what Maya people do is you become the center of the universe. You position yourself at the center and you say, I am pointing at 4 relative cardinal points because the center is my heart right now and my consciousness of being one with earth. And then from that centering comes this humility to listen and ask that your senses be open. So for example, when I'm going to collect a plant, I can't just grab it. I have to observe how many there are. There are rules. I cannot just take everything. What if it's the only one? What if it's the one that gives the seed, or what's the one that pollinates? You have to check these things. So they have these names of male, female plant. And you have to observe and respectfully ask permission to the plant to collect it so that it keeps its healing energy. So in the Maya worldview, everything has consciousness, and the prayers are to reconnect our consciousness to the one of the forest and the plant. So they have a word for this. It's called it's our vital energy. It's also the energy of the sun. It's a biophoton. It's an element of energy that is conscious, that connects your own energy field. Let's call it something, because there are no translation. There's no words for these concepts in English, with that of the plant. And this benevolence starts to happen where when I collect a plant to study it in the lab, I have to ask for the plant to keep its, let's call it chi, right? Its energy. And it's done with such respect. The prayers are a way to be mindful and to connect like that. So it immediately puts your brain in this capacity to pay more attention to what's going on. Oh, I forgot part of the root system. I have to leave some roots here so that it can regrow, not just yank it. And these other things. So I guess in a way, what these prayers do is help you get into that mindset of connectivity with the forest, to observe it as another element with it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You mentioned, as you described the prayer, the 4 directions, and now you've talked about that as, you know, really the centerpiece of the Maya worldview, and how that's reflected in a lot of dimensions of the kind of health practices that they have, and that it starts to get into where we're like not only going out and physically collecting something, but emotionally preparing yourself to be able to notice. So can you say a bit about that kind of, you know, the landscape of Maya medicine and those kind of 4 elements and how they become interwoven in the approach?
Yes, definitely. And you see, here is where a lot of scientists think, oh, that's too esoteric. That has nothing to do with pragmatic avenues for healing and, you know, scientific research. And in truth, it is precisely being able to observe with those goggles that the worldview changes and the way we do science changes. And we call these in anthropology emic views. So we have emic views is the insider's approach based on our own understanding of the rules of how the world works. And ethic views is the outsider's approach, what we scientists do. You know, we abstract, we, you know, synthesize and make sense of stuff we're observing. So I realize we need both in science. We need emic views, ethic views, but we need to try to understand the emic views of those people we are working with and studying with. And in Maya worldview, it was very clearly explained this concept of kahtzuk. Kahtzuk means the 4 constitutive elements of anything. And in the human body, it is understood as, can I show you a graph so that it's easier?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to abuse the screen time. You know? I think that if I use this, it'll be easier to understand. And I may use an example from an actual case I was researching with a guy that had a very serious skin carcinoma thingy, and researching how the ethnomedical system works allows us to go beyond what is evident. It's not just about, oh my God, this guy had a stage 4 skin carcinoma that was really bad. Nana Panchita, who's the healer you see in this picture, diagnosed him and said, oh, okay, yes, the outside example is a skin carcinoma, but let's apply the kahtzuk. Kahtzuk means balance, equilibrium of 4 cardinal points, of 4 elements, like a table. You take one of its legs out and it'll fumble a bit. So there's a concept called kahtzuk and one called wachalal. Wachalal means we are one. You are me, I am you. Everything is interconnected. And she said, okay, the patient in the Maya calendar system, his energy is to wind. And in the physical sense, we can see a tumor. He's in pain, it's going to crack. It hurts. But she said, that's only the physical element. So you see this square here in the graph. I'm sorry, if I put on a presentation mode, you won't be able to. It won't let me show you this stuff. But so the kahtzuk is like that square, and a human stands in the middle. Your physical body is the red triangle, and it represents anything affecting your vessel. Right? Bacteria affect our vessels, habits, what we drink, what we eat. So there's a very clear conception that a part of diseases come from the body. But there's another conception of the emotional body. That's the yellow and corresponds to what we feel in our heart. There's the white one that represents our thoughts and our mind and things that can come from there. And the black one that represents our connection to our ancestors, spirit, energy, the thing that is not tangible, but that it can become. So each one of these is represented by an element. So our body is fire, mind is wind, emotions are water, and the spirit side is earth. It has a lot of meanings, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but the point is that how is this applied in real life? Why is this relevant? Because when this patient was being treated, she said his wife died a year ago. He can't forgive himself. He's mourning. He has a severe loss, but he feels guilty because his wife died of a stomach problem because he feels he never fed her enough. They were very poor. So he was blaming himself for her death. And she said his mind is playing these tricks with guilt and thoughts of failing his wife and so on. And he said all of these has caused his spirit to basically elope. His energy system doesn't want to be on Earth because he has this susto. It's a category of a syndromic event from Maya epistemology. And so she said, this whole thing, we have to treat him minding these 4 elements, because if we don't treat the guilt, if we don't treat his sadness, and we just treat the tumor is going to go away, but it's going to come back. So the cylinder in the middle represents the Huachalal concept, the interconnectedness of him having a family, a community, an environment, and being part of creation. And so she gave him treatments for each part. Usually the plants happen in the individual level. My body, I need to balance it out. But there are other ways to use plants at the community level that are really important. So the point that I want to say is that if we miss out on these concepts and we focus only on the plants, we could lose the significance and the relevance of a holistic treatment. That's how his face looks after 4 months of treatment, which included some of these plants, but it included using the Maya calendar called Nahuales, the Cholquij energy system for balancing the body, and a bunch of other stuff, changes in diet. And the reason why I'm sharing this slide is because to give you an example of these seemingly esoteric principles have very specific applications in health and well-being. And they come from deep observations of nature and how animals and humans relate to it as well.
Yeah, so I love that as part of the relevance to biomimicry here, where you start to say, this is fascinating and beautiful, but how is it biomimicry? What does it have to say to us? And, I think when we look at the questions that we're facing, say, human health management is a big question, a big challenge that we face. And the solutions that we have for it are very expensive. They can be very exclusive. They can have a lot of, industrial practices. They can involve harsh chemicals with hard side effects. There's all kinds of things that we accept as part of the package of our solution when we look to it. And we say, well, that's not the only solution. What would be a biomimetic solution towards health management? And this approach has it. And you were saying earlier about how directly relevant that biomimetic approach, or how directly it is a practice of biomimicry. Whereas in specifically this skin cancer treatment, you said how you were amazed at its effectiveness and the way that it resonated with modern medical approaches. And then you asked, where did they get it from? And give us a bit of that story.
Yeah, that was interesting. We were walking in the forest with 5 Swiss scientists, top scientists. I've never been in Central America, so they were amazed at everything. And one of them was a photodynamic therapy specialist. And so one of the elders said, this thing you call skin cancer, it's not really that bad. We can treat it. So everyone was kind of like, yeah, really. Yes, really. We use the energy of Father Son. And it's so benevolent that it interacts with the consciousness of our elder sisters, the plants, and it creates a healing effect on the skin. But, we have to do it early in the morning when the red sun is coming up. And so all the oncologists and the psychologists and the biologists in the group said, yeah, okay, cool, poetry, Maya poetry. But this guy, Dr. Balt, said, wait, what did you say about the red sun? And so they start having a conversation, and we discovered they were describing a photodynamic principle. So some of the plants in the forest are photosensitizers that are oxygen reactive species when the sun hits. And so they generate apoptosis in the skin and other mechanisms for antibacterial, for disinfecting and so on. And so it took us a while to go from the poetry to the actual understanding. And there was a very deep scientific principle behind what we're saying. And Dr. Val, to give you an example, said, well, we use only red light with beams, laser beams, because that's the one that penetrates the skin the furthest. And he said, yes, I know. We've been observing the sun and its effects for ages. So that's why we use only the red sun. And so to the Maya guy, this was like obvious. It was not not knew what Dr. Balt was saying, but to the other scientists, it was like, my God, we could have completely ignored this amazing piece of wisdom if there wasn't someone who had the ears to hear what he was saying. So then I asked, how did you know about this disease? Oh, well, we just observed the wild boars. My great-grandfather, and I don't know how long this remedy has been in existence for, because this guy was about 80 years old, and his great-grandfather taught him by observing hiote, which is a skin disease caused by a bacteria, in the skin of wild boars. And he says when it was really bad, these massive jabalís would go and rub against a bunch of very specific plants in the forest, cause them to, cover all their skin, and then they would go and lay in the sun. And they could see an effect, and they could observe it. So that's how he says they came to understand that this was important. And by observing the behavior of animals in nature, a lot of these treatments have become for humans, except humans have the ability to then extrapolate to other things, right? Because when Leishmania hit that area, the Leishmaniasis, then they started to use the treatment for Leishmaniasis. And now that diabetes is the #1 chronic disease, which was not 50 years ago, they learn also to apply the photodynamic therapy principles on diabetic foot. And so it's interesting to see, because there's tons of examples of how by observing the behavior of monkeys, bats, and animals, they were able to more quickly understand very unique characteristics of these plants and interacting with the sun. And so I love that story.
Yeah, I love it. And it shows the importance of the connection, that whole integrated nature of it, because you could say, oh, it's this plant, take that and we'll extract something from it. But you needed that whole process. If you didn't expose it to light, if you didn't expose it to light at the right time of day to get the right filtration, right, that it wouldn't work. And I think that's one of those real lessons for us from an indigenous perspective, is that in the academic perspective, it's very much isolate and look at these very discrete variables. And then we end up with information about those variables in a very specific, setting and very specific conditions, which can be so completely different from the conditions in nature or within a full tradition of use of those plants for therapies.
Yes.
And how it all comes together and can also be functioning on multi-tiers, right? Where the you say, like there's the physical use of the plant, but then there's the emotional level of coming to deal with the person's emotional framing, and how that could be relevant. But that there's also now more and more medical analysis and evidence of how those emotional states are really reflected in hormones and chemicals and states of reaction in our body, where you could then see very directly how a particular treatment may or may not be effective given a heightened level of sensitivity in in other systems within your body. So it's I love the level at which it's all at play, and it takes a lot of different forms. You can't really pinpoint every time all of what it is, and that's kind of the big lesson. It seems to me. What would you say kind of are the big takeaways that you have learned from looking at nature this way, looking at health in this way?
Well, one thing is to not underestimate the heavy effect of understanding interconnectedness between all the subspecies in a system. And I was the first one to say, hey, I want to extract this plant and go take it to the lab and see what it does. And yay, we have a new inexpensive photosensitizer. Or the same thing with cardamom is a great example, right? It's used for anti-inflammatory, healing the lungs. But the elders know which one to pick It's the one that's been bitten by this tiny insect called tip, because it is the relationship of that insect bite that causes the cardamom's reaction to create the chemical that is an anti-inflammatory for us. Otherwise, it's just a spice we put on coffee or on our cakes. So this deep observation in the interconnectedness of these species in a system, it's a gift from indigenous knowledge. It's second nature to them, but we have to really make an effort to look at it. The same with human relationships. And why do we heal? Yeah, we can have a really cool insight from biomimicry, but if we take it out without understanding why it works in that interconnectedness, it might not work. And I think, Andrew, I was sharing with you before this story of when I was studying cancer treatments with Tata Simeon, and we were following patients. So I had to document everything these guys were doing and then take them to the lab. And so I had exhaustive lists of all the plants they used, how they could, everything. And we visited a patient that was really bad, had a stage 4 cancer, started in her breast, and she was dying. And he had diagnosed that her biggest problem was emotional, fighting with her sister. And she felt unloved. She felt she shouldn't be on earth. And so he said, look, I'm going to bring the medicine. I've been working for a week on all the compounds and change of diet. We're doing a ceremony. And so he comes with all this stuff. We visit this woman. He involved the whole family. He gave a treatment to each member and said, you're going to be in charge of the fire ceremony. You're going to be in charge of this. And finally, at the end, we were about to leave. And he says, oh, I have the most important medicine. And he pulls out this red bottle. It's a liter of a red liquid. And calls the sister and says, you have the most important task of all. You have to give your sister this medicine every morning and every night. And you have to take 1 spoonful and pray with her. Whatever it is you pray, Catholic, Protestant, whatever. The point is, you ask the Creator for the healing of your sister, but you pray with her, holding her hand. And then after you pray together and you bless the medicine, you give it to her. And so the sister was like, yeah. So do you want your sister to heal? Yeah. Anyway, we leave, and I'm looking at my list, and this bottle is not on my list. So I said, Tata Simeon, what is this? Oh, that's just hibiscus tea. Okay, so it's not medicinal? Well, it is the most important treatment because our patient feels unloved by her sister. I need her to know her sister loves her. So by praying with her every morning, it'll create the right mindset for the other medicine I prepared to work, because otherwise, all of these compounds that I have given her are useless because the mind is so powerful that I need to create the right mood. So he was activating that yellow part that I showed you in the square of an emotional well-being. And we know from psychoneuroimmunology, right, that these pathways are real, that when we're depressed or sad, our central nervous system shoots everything so badly that our immune responses cannot work as well, and we get sick. But for the Maya worldview, knowing the interconnectedness of things, they use it in their favor, not only to prevent the negative feedback loops between our mind, central nervous system, and our immune response and so on, but positively. They also work on the positive feedback loops. Okay, so if it works negatively, why not the other way around? And so I guess to answer your question, this is one of the things that has shaped my research a lot, in understanding how the connectedness of things works, so that we need to still abstract in the lab and make sense of the data, but at least knowing what things to keep in mind as relevant variables, I think change our possibilities for finding something that is like really useful for humanity in health.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Thank you for all of this work. And I'd like to now open up the conversation. We have a great crowd here. Everyone, you can either post your questions in the chat and I can kind of tap you to go, but I think that there's enough of us here that if we just kind of are mindful of each other, you can pop off your or turn on your microphone and just begin the conversation. Okay, great. Let's see some questions here. Susan, why don't you begin? Is that right? I'm looking for the names on. Okay.
Is that? I haven't got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's Sarah.
Hello. Thank you so much, Monica. This was fantastic because I love the way you mix the, like I said in the notes, like the two eyes, the two-eyed seeing, the two perspectives. You do it really beautifully, and you navigate this world so nicely that I hope that more and more people are able to do this. But I have a question that we are also talking about in the world of biomimicry, but I'm curious to know your perspective. Biopiracy is a really big issue in this world, and intellectual property. And I'm wondering, in this very technical space, and you're like in, the Western science world as well, what do you think could be right protocols of navigating this and honoring this knowledge, and also making sure that it doesn't get patented in this kind of way, and figure that out? Just would love to know your thoughts on that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Sarah, for this question. My answer is not popular, but it is truly coming from my heart and from experience. I for 5 years, I ran a project on the Nagoya Protocol. For those of, I'm guessing the most of you know this, right? So inside the CBD, the Convention on Biodiversity, some mechanisms were created to facilitate a respectful exchange between scientists and companies, for-profit companies, and indigenous peoples. So in the Nagoya Protocol, there are these access and benefit sharing principles, but you need the country where there's indigenous people live to be able to truly utilize it well. Guatemala did not have all of the structure in place, but that's what was available. So we thought, why not? Let's do it. Push it. We hit 200,000 walls on laws and regulations that really never made it possible to have one of these agreements work, either because it wasn't good enough for the Maya people, or wasn't good enough for the companies, wasn't good enough for whatever. The hardest thing to learn from that was that intellectual property rights is makeup for the majority of people. No one really wants to respect it. They just want to say that they do. So yes, we're having this amazing project with indigenous peoples in Guatemala. And here's our access and benefit sharing agreement. And when you look at what the common practices are worldwide, it's customary to have a 1% of profits, when profits actually happen, which can be 10 years down the road, coming back to communities. And it doesn't have to be in cash. You can negotiate all these other benefits. In truth, when you look at case studies, the successful examples are minimal. Because it seems to me that a lot of these systems to protect intellectual property of indigenous peoples were really created just to colonize it better and abuse it a bit more, with the right makeup looking like you're not doing it. Not everyone. It's great for research, but it's not so great when you actually want to take it to a level of patents and So obviously, I'm a bit of an activist, not just a scientist, when I look at this. And what we found out worked better was, okay, we tried with the Nagoya Protocol until some laws are changing Guatemala. That's not going to happen. So we challenged the statu quo and asked, why are you willing to engage with indigenous peoples as the providers of these knowledge and, bye-bye, see you later, rather than engaging them as entrepreneurs? And so we created a company called the Green Health Initiative, where the owners of the company are indigenous peoples. And the idea is that they can have a direct say in the business just by putting this knowledge. And of course, for some reason, it's so easy to protect intellectual property if you're a company, but not if you're indigenous people. And so there are, of course, you can publish and then you can protect it that way. You can do publications and say, okay, this came from this group in Guatemala, in this area. No one can claim it's not theirs. But usually if you publish, as you know, some things will never see the light of day in a commercial form. I have a really good friend who lost a cancer treatment because of this, because of publishing too early. And then no one wanted to really go and produce it. So the thing is that in my view, it is a paradigm shift to say, can we actually relate? Can we empower indigenous communities to own their own businesses, to own the companies and engage in those relationships if what we want to do is for profit and we want to still protect intellectual property, and most importantly, they need to get out of poverty. So this is my agenda. Yes, of course, there are treatments, I'm not going to say cure, treatments for diabetes and cancer and menopause that we want to study. But if we find these things to be successful, I would like for, if there's revenue, to come back to these communities and change the levels of extreme poverty we observe here. Because that's the fair thing to do. But if there are no mechanisms to even protect the property and make sure that they have a part in the benefits, then it's just another way of we say in Spanish, despojo, like taking again away. So it's a tricky subject, and I'm not going to say much more about it, but I think it could be a whole discussion in another panel.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that is amazing work that you're doing with Green Health there. I see we have another question from Camilo.
Yeah, and before I saw a comment by someone on the chat, and it says that I just want to say this talk is so beautiful. It's so validating to hear witness of the interconnectedness and topology of life and time. So I'm very happy about that comment. I had like 3 questions, and now that you went into like intellectual property, I think that's fundamental, because very recently these larger AI companies have been talking about completely eradicating what has been intellectual property law. Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter, still works on Square, said that, and then advisor to the president, Elon Musk, absolutely agreed. And they had this discussion on Twitter, and I think that that's a fundamental question right now. There's a lot of extraction, there's a lot of colonization of digital spaces as well. And as you were mentioning, there might be an opportunity here, truly, if we look at indigenous wisdom, to do revenue share and intellectual property that is like truly theirs, right? And yours. So I feel like you that have like the possibility and the many different knowledges, right? Like not only from your PhDs, but also just ancestral wisdom, that I think you might be able to guide the conversation in a way that is truly fruitful, and that truly is 2025 and doesn't feel like 1492. So I feel like that is very helpful. I have one comment about one thing that I wanted to clarify with you. You worded despojo, which I definitely, coming from Colombia and understanding so much of what despojo truly feels like in so many ways. There's this other word you used, which is susto, which I think in Spanish I didn't realize actually deals with a Mayan concept. Do you mind explaining what susto means from both perspectives, and why is it such a fundamental thing to tackle in terms of like healing?
Yes. So susto has its own word in Maya, in every Maya language. So susto is a Spanish word that can be translated as fright. But what it really is in Maya cosmogony, you can call it, it's induced by, you can say post-traumatic stress disorder. It is an event that starts with being completely frightened by something. And in the Maya explanation of things, your mind detaches from your body, your energy system detaches from your body, and you're in a state of limbo. You're there, but you're not there. You're conscious, you can function, you can eat, depending on how bad susto is for you. But you will die if untreated. I've experienced many treatments of susto that I've been documenting over the past 20 years, and it's really impressive to see the beginning of susto has physical effects, right? Diarrhea and vomiting. It's different for each people, but when a healer determines that this is actually true, the treatment has to involve this emotional, spiritual component that is very strong. And it's about bringing the people back into homeostasis, into feeling safe, into. But more than just, it's not just talking and stuff. They actually do a ceremony that involves calling your ancestors and the spirit world to help bring your spirit back. And it's amazing to see these people, after a susto ceremony is completed, regaining consciousness and regaining physical abilities that they had lost for a while. So there's something that I cannot really describe on biological models explaining to you, oh yeah, this is because so and so. I could see things that I have no explanations in the Western paradigms to explain. But so in a nutshell, the war in Guatemala, the civil war, much like in Colombia, left deep historical trauma in some areas, and whole populations with susto who saw their houses burned, their relatives killed, tortured, and who haven't healed. A whole generation that was having this susto, this historical trauma. And so to see how Maya medicine can even approach collective trauma and heal it and give options and solutions for it, that also was amazing for me to see. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question about a little bit about susto, but there's a lot of publications from anthropologists on this. If you're interested, I can share.
And a lot of psychology too. I'm so happy you brought it up. I feel like as people that have suffered PTSD or complex PTSD, I think that feels like a really great way of understanding that it's historically and geographically rooted, and it has been it permeates throughout the ages unless tackled in a very comprehensive way. So that was a beautiful answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's amazing too, where we think of some of those issues as seemingly very contemporary. I mean, they are contemporary, but almost as though people didn't deal with this in the past. And you realize, no, this is the effect of deep fright, of trauma, and there are solutions that human populations have had that we can learn so much from. There, okay, it looks like Susan is now with her hand properly raised. So what are you, Susan?
Hi, I think that the other person whose hand raised was raised before me.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Janelle, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. Monica, I think many of us on this call are in the U.S., and I think, my question is about hope, I guess, and just your thoughts on the future. So we're in a really difficult place. I think, the way that I see the world right now is that we are a broken society. We're a broken people. In the US, and things have gotten a lot worse. So, alongside that, right, I'm also seeing a lot of conversations around doing things better in the biomimicry world. And I'm also seeing examples from the Suti Hill popping up in my life. I've read some books from Martine Prechtel, and there's a lot of connectivity between that work and the US. And as an example, I live in Bozeman, Montana, and there's a local person who works within indigenous cultures and works with the Blackfeet, and they are hosting a relational foraging workshop. So they are bringing the work from the Suti Hill to Bozeman, Montana. So that gives me a little bit of like simultaneous sadness and also hope. So I'm curious what you think about hope and where you see us going. Do you think that these lessons are getting to the people they need to get to? Are things getting better?
Well, I said earlier that Maya wisdom runs very deep. And there are all of these calendars. The Chok'ich calendar is the one spiritual healers use to understand the cycles of the body. The Hab is the calendar used to understand the cycles of Earth. There are other calendars that explain the cycles of, let's say, humanity walking through Earth. And since 2012, when we ended the long count calendar of over 5,000 years, which has all of these have astronomical, mathematical relationships. These are not arbitrary; they're very deep. And there was this clear understanding that there was a shift coming, a planetary shift, and this is all across Maya epistemology. And the question was, there's a very ancient prophecy of the eagle, as you know, representing the traditional peoples of North America, and the condor representing the people from South America, coming in the land of the Quetzal, our national bird of Mesoamerica, this green feathered serpent-like, and that the three of them would create the potential for humans to learn to see themselves in a different way. And these prophecies, let's call them, were just readings of the time as we walk on earth. And there was a very clear an understanding that the darkest part of the night is right before the sun comes up. And that's the meaning of the Nahual called Akabal. It's both light and darkness, and both are viewed without judgment. So a lot of our brothers and sisters in government, I mean, I just lost 2 grants in February because of the dismantling of USAID. So my research, I had to hold it. I know how it feels to be affected by a decision of someone that seems arbitrary. I had to stop research that I thought was meaningful, and that could create an impact. And just as I was ready to swear, the Maya elder said, "Hey, you're judging. Yes, it sucks. Yes, it's going to cause a lot of pain. This is the darkness, and it's necessary so people can choose where they want to be." So in the Maya way of seeing things, we're always presented with a choice. And those who choose to, I'm going to get maybe a little bit too spiritual here, but you asked me my opinion. We all come from the same place, from the same source. We're all biophotons. We're all wavelengths existing. We're all light. But some people in the government, in the US and in other places, have decided to twist their light so badly and bend it so lightly to reflect only darkness. And they are doing us a favor in a way that they are representing something really nasty, so we can choose what we want to be. And sometimes if we don't have these mirrors, we lay in this plate of comfort and mediocrity, because we don't get to choose, okay, this is enough. I don't want the planet to go to, hell. I don't want to keep destroying the water. I don't want microplastics in all my food. But until we actually have these intense, contrary examples to what we think life should be, sometimes we don't choose to act. And so in a way, the Maya way of seeing things is take all this darkness as an invitation to choose who you really are. What is the Biomimicry Institute going to do? What is each one of us going to do? Because when we are faced with such extremes, we have to become a bit more of the light we didn't want to shine before. Right? We didn't want to share something. We didn't want to be vocal. We didn't want to be too political. We didn't want to. So that's how I see it. And I see that in the measure of us becoming small islands of coherence, we can shift this chaotic system by connecting, by creating these networks of coherence. And so that's my view on the thing. And I think the responsibility is individual, but only in the way that we understand our interconnectedness as being bigger than ourselves. So, esoteric part over.
All right, Susan.
Thank you. I'm this just a wonderful talk. Thank you so much. I've got so many things buzzing around in my head, things that have coming to the surface. One is I live in the UK, and we used to, back in Celtic times, Druid times, have indigenous wisdom about plants and medicine, and they burnt witches at the stake, women they considered for who were the healers. So much of that indigenous wisdom was deliberately destroyed. But in some places, there's a wonderful woman called Diana Beresford who wrote a book, I Speak for the Trees, and she's Irish and they sent the Celtic wisdom about the trees and the plants down through the female line, but to just very few people. And she received that wisdom. And she's written about it, which is wonderful. And as modern medicine are discovering things, the wisdom of these ancient Celtic peoples is like being proven by modern science. Like, for example, I don't know if I pronounce it right, but the taxine that was found in the yew tree, which is being used as a chemo treatment for breast cancer, was known by the Celtic people, and it was used centuries ago. So it seems to me like we're almost trying to plunder the indigenous wisdom of people now, but that's not necessarily, I mean, we've lost our own indigenous wisdom, but I think it's in the plants that grow here. And I think that there should be more focus on trying to recover that wisdom. The second thing I wanted to say was that a lot of the illnesses that you're talking about, cancer and diabetes and so on, we've done it to ourselves. The way we've chosen to rear animals, rear food, and so on is what's killing us. It's a wonderful book called "You Are What Your Food Ate" by Anne Bickle, where she and that just makes so much sense. In arthritis, they're doing some research in Stanford where they're taking beef that's been reared on grain and feeding it to something. Now, the grain causes inflammation in the cows, so they have to have antibiotics and steroids and so on. And then they fed them grass-fed beef. And within an hour of having the grain-fed beef, inflammation was appearing in the patient, but not with grass-fed. So we've lost that, I don't know, that sort of connection of not being appalled that we would feed a ruminant grain. And then we would fill it full of medicines to prevent the illnesses that are caused by a ruminant eating grain. And then we want to eat it. So our entire food system is destroying us. And then we want to turn to indigenous peoples and say, give us the medicine that's going to cure us. But we really have to focus on sorting ourselves out and having respect for the plants, for the animals, regaining that respect and respect for ourselves. We are all nature. So that's not really a question, but that's what it's come up for me as you've been talking.
No, it's perfect. And I have just a reaction to your wisdom being shared. Is we all have indigenous wisdom inside. We all have ancestors. We all come from somewhere. We can always learn about all parts of the world. There's something very beautiful that my teacher Simeon Takira told me. I was raised a Catholic in the Opus Dei system, very strict. And of course, walking the Maya path changed my views on everything. And he said, one thing you have to understand about indigenous wisdom is it just makes you better at whoever you are. This is not a religion. This is not a way of believing. It's not rules. It's a way of being on earth, being with others. So if you're already a Hindu and you follow the indigenous way, you will be an even better Hindu. If you are a Catholic, if you're a Muslim, whatever faith you practice, when you really connect to the indigenous way of seeing the planet, of seeing each other, of seeing how interconnected we all are. And there's the illusion of harming someone and not getting the effect disappears. That's the gift indigenous wisdom gives you, and that can come from anywhere in the world. So I think that I love that because it shows us you guys don't have to come to Guatemala and study with a Maya healer to be able to reconnect to the forest in a way. In fact, I think people who study biomimicry already have those goggles and they can activate them faster than other people because get to see things beyond the obvious. And I think that's a lovely way of being. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other is that indigenous wisdom, I've never heard any of the elders use the word plunder. They actually say it's time to share what we've been keeping. And they told me, 500 years we had to keep this secret because it was going to be destroyed. So when 2012 came, they said, okay, it's time to do this. If the world wants it, here it is. If they don't want it, it's fine. But whoever has the heart to take it, it was our duty as a people to save it for all of you guys, because hard times are coming and indigenous wisdom is going to be needed. So I guess that's more an invitation. And when I was being trained as an akih, I never got anyone recriminating me. Oh, why are you studying? How come you got 7 teachers? I was very lucky to have not 1, but 7 training me. And no one said, oh, you're not really born into a Maya family. I'm mestizo. I'm a mix of everything in Guatemala, right? And no one ever said, why are you learning the Maya path? You don't deserve it. You're just going to steal our knowledge. Actually, I was invited and welcomed and nurtured to really learn it well. So I think there's a myth that we are trespassing when we want to know indigenous knowledge. If we come respectfully, I've always seen it be very welcoming, but respect is the key.
Well, thank you so much, Monica. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is, as always, the start of a conversation. We are open on the Hive. We can continue posting questions or comments that we have for this. We'll be sharing more, takeaways from this conversation in the coming weeks. But we can encourage all of you to post on the Hive and contact each other and continue this exploration and exploration of these ideas. Thank you so much, Monica, for joining us today, for the beautiful work you're doing through Green Health, and best wishes to you and all of your colleagues. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again next month. We'll have philosopher of biomimicry, Henry Dix, will be joining us. So that'll take another kind of angle at this whole practice of biomimicry. And in the meantime, lots more ideas to explore and share here on the Hive and through all of the work that we do. So thank you, Monica, and everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for being here. I look forward to engaging in future conversations and seminars. Have a lovely, lovely day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.